This is the incredible story of Olympic Airways Flight 411. On the 9th of August 1978, an Olympic Airways Boeing 747 was preparing to depart Hellinikon Airport in Greece, bound for JFK International Airport in New York. The plane had 398 passengers on board and about 20 crew members, adding up to about 418 people on this plane. The 747 was absolutely huge, and Olympic Airlines was keen to tap the travel demand between the US and Greece with their 747s. And so this plane was mostly filled with Americans returning to the US from Greece. The jumbo jet was piloted by Captain Sifis Megadis and First Officer Kostas Vikardos. The 747 was fueled up with about 150 tons of fuel for the flight to New York. Just before 2 p.m., the 747 started its roll down the runway. The plane picked up speed, and soon they were at the V1 speed, the speed at which they could no longer safely reject the takeoff. As the captain started to lift the nose of the plane into the air, a loud bang rocked the 747. Captain Megadis had no idea what had happened. Did a tire blow? Did an engine explode? Whatever the cause, he did not have a choice. They were going too fast to stop in the runway that was remaining. But in the cabin crew member Lucia Siachu got an intercom message from a colleague at the back. Engine number 3, or the inboard engine on the right-hand side, had blown up. The colleague said, "We are screwed." She replied with, "I know." Controllers in the tower watched on in horror as they watched the plane struggle to gain altitude. The shattered engine peppered the runway with parts. In the cockpit, the captain was trying to coax every ounce of performance from the stricken plane, but they had problems. Engine number 2 had undergone some maintenance, and so was only producing 94% of power, as opposed to the 110% that it was supposed to generate. Making matters worse for the crew, the captain asked the flight engineer to turn on the alcohol enrichment valve. In the 1970s, planes had an alcohol fuel enrichment system to improve performance, but unfortunately, the flight engineer turned it off instead of turning it on. But the plane took off. That was a miracle in its own right. Captain Megadis, an ex-combat pilot, immediately commanded a retraction of the landing gear. This was against Boeing's policy for this situation. You see, right now the plane is in a precarious situation. It's low and slow, and it needs all the speed that it can get. Retracting the gear now would mean that the landing gear doors would open and then close, meaning that there would be a temporary increase in drag. And at that point, any increase in drag would be enough to send the plane crashing back down. His first officer complied. His reasoning was that he needed the speed in the long term. He had a hill in his flight path, and there was no way that he'd be able to clear the hill with the landing gear slowing the plane down. He was relying on his decades of experience, and so he made the call. The controllers watched as the plane barely gained any altitude once the gear was up. The plane gained a bit of altitude, but would it be enough? The 200-foot tall Panos Hill was now barely a mile away. The captain didn't have a choice. He pulled the nose up as the airspeed that he had built up so far bled away. The jumbo jet cleared the hill by 9 feet. Talk about cutting it close. But this was far from over. Climbing to avoid the hill had cost him the precious airspeed that he needed to keep his plane in the air. He now had to drop the nose to speed up. Otherwise, the jumbo jet would just drop out of the sky. The captain decided to trade about 50 feet of altitude for about 6 knots of airspeed. It wasn't much, but it would keep them from stalling. At this point, the jet was so low that it barely cleared the television antennas in the district of Kallithea. In fact, they were so low that Lucia Siachu remembered seeing the shocked expression of people in nearby buildings as the jumbo jet flew by. In the cockpit, Captain Megadis knew that they were done for. He did not expect anyone to survive what was about to come next. His main objective was to put the plane down in a place that would minimize ground casualties. He knew he had to make it to Mount Aigaleo across the city, as that would be the best place for the 747 to crash. Here's a translated quote from the captain. "We were considered dead. It was over." In the cabin, the passengers were unaware of what was unfolding, and some thought that this was a planned sightseeing tour and started taking pictures. So far, the captain's skill, the early retraction of the gear, and the ground effect had kept them airborne. But they were now headed for the mountain, and with the way things were at the time, they knew that they couldn't overfly it. But their luck changed. Flight engineer Trebos had successfully managed to optimize the three remaining engines, giving them some more power to work with. In addition to that, a southwest sea breeze began to blow, bringing up the speed of the plane. Lastly, since the plane had departed the city, the ground was relatively cooler, and by extension, the air was as well. The colder air gave the plane more lift. So their airspeed began to creep up, and so did their altitude. But the ground beneath them was also rising. Captain McGaddis knew that even with everything working in his favor, he still wouldn't have enough airspeed to clear the mountain. But they had just enough airspeed to bank away without stalling. He turned the plane out to sea and waited as the airspeed picked up. They climbed slowly. When they hit 300 feet, the captain decided to retract the flaps a bit, as he now felt more confident in his plane. He then climbed to 1,500 feet and started dumping fuel to bring down their weight. With the plane much lighter, the 747 was able to climb safely and could make its way back to Helinicon International Airport, and against all odds, Flight 411 landed back without a single injury. When everyone looked at the data from the recorders, they were quite shocked, as Captain McGaddis had managed to keep this plane in the air, despite slowing down to 158 knots at some points. If you just looked at the data, this plane should have crashed. And had the 747 gone down, it would have been the third worst air crash of all time, considering that they had 418 people on board. With the plane down safely, they got to work to determine what had almost brought this jumbo jet down. Now, since this video was based on the Wikipedia page and not the final report, there's not much technical information to go around. But the Wikipedia page says that the number 3 engine blew up because it overheated. You see, on the ground, when they were preparing to take off, they were prepping the plane. While on the ground, the water injection for engine number 3 was on, but the flight engineer turned it off thinking that he was turning it on. According to the Wikipedia article, this caused the number 3 engine to overheat and explode. But in my opinion, that's not quite the full story, but do correct me if I'm wrong. Based on a bit of reading, the 747 did have water injection for engines at the time, but their primary purpose was performance and not cooling. You see, the more stuff that you can throw out of the back of an engine, the more thrust you can generate, and adding water adds more mass to the exhaust of the jet, thus giving it more thrust. Also, with water injection, you can add more fuel to the mixture, which allows the engine to generate more power without overheating. That's kind of counterintuitive. Water, which normally suppresses combustion, now gives you more power? Who would have thought? So yeah, leaving the water injection off can have disastrous consequences. But in this case, those consequences were averted thanks to one man, Captain McGaddis. He could have stuck to Boeing's checklist and kept the gear extended, but he did not. He had the foresight to think ahead and break the rules in a way that saved everyone's lives. His feat of flying was so unbelievable that he kept a copy of the flight data recorder on his person because people did not believe him when he told them what he had done. What's more impressive is that he only had a few split seconds to make his decisions. Take, for example, the case of Spantax Airlines Flight 583. It was an almost identical accident. The captain there made a similar gamble, but it didn't pay off. This just goes to show you the pressure that pilots are under when things go very, very wrong. Also, Netflix, why isn't this a movie? This story is absolutely incredible, and I would definitely watch a movie on this. You're paying to keep Riverdale on your platform. I'm sure you can afford this, Netflix. Come on, make it happen. Also, if you want to watch an interview with the captain, I'll link that in the description. It's a first-hand account of what happened, and I'm sure you'll love it. What do you think would have happened if the captain had retracted the gear as per the procedures? Do you think they would have made it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this incredible episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. I will catch you guys next time. Stay safe.